Hey everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today for our first ever and the first part of our integrations webinar series. In a series of firsts, this is also my first time hosting a webinar in Cvent's newest product, Cvent Webinar, named appropriately. So if you've joined us for similar webinars in the past, then you'll be familiar with some of the interactive tools. So just to the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the chat window. So you can click on chat and chat with other attendees, as well as myself and any of my colleagues that are helping moderate today's session. You'll also notice a live polling area, and we're going to do some pulse checks as we go along today and sort of understand who you are, what you're into in terms of Cvent and integrations, as well as sort of finding out more about what you're hoping us to integrate with. And also, if you have questions along the way, you'll notice that there is a Q&A tab. You can click on there, ask questions. If you notice that somebody else is asking a similar question to what you have, you can actually upvote somebody else's question. So that's very helpful. And then finally, as we close out today's session, we'll ask you to complete a survey, right? It's the only way that we get better at these webinars and we get better at the work that we do is through your feedback. So we really appreciate in advance as we get closer to the end of the presentation to go ahead and submit that feedback survey. So if I haven't met you before, my name's Ryan Costa. I am a product lead here at Cvent, celebrating in just a few weeks my 10th year here. So big milestone for me. Prior to being the product lead over integrations, I was actually a solutions consultant and probably worked with a lot of you out there um, speaking and discussing the Cvent platform, how it could fit your needs and use cases, and more importantly, how you get that data out of the platform and start using it in the other sort of integral business tech stack that you have going on. So really, absolutely happy to be here and happy to be discussing, how to get really started with integrating Cvent with the rest of your tech stack. For me, I love working with integrations because that's when I really see stakeholders outside of that sort of core event producer, persona that we all know. I see other stakeholders. That's when they get their aha or their eureka moment, right? When they can see what event data really means to completing a profile or completing that story that you're really building about your prospects and customers. So today is part one of a series where we'll cover a lot of the why, who, and what of integrating with Cvent. Part two in this series that'll happen next month will be more specific to solutions. So, we'll want to find out from you all what solutions you're working with and what you'd like to integrate with, and make sure we're shaping future installments of the webinar series around deep diving into those solutions. So, as we get started today, I really want to acknowledge that I know that integrations can be a little scary. They can be confusing. More specifically, maybe they're just not clear. Um, you use all of these different tools. They all do seemingly different things, although sometimes they overlap. And we're really trying to understand, which systems need to be connected. It's not always clear which way the data should be flowing, and you're not clear on what data is even important to integrate to achieve your business goals, or where you are from a technology strategy standpoint to even begin investigating integrations. You can be not clear on who should be involved in an integration discussion and who's actually putting their hands on keyboards and configuring or building out an integration. And then, of course, when we're filled with more questions than we have answers, we're oftentimes not clear on how to get started. And that's really why we're here today, right? I want to get you on a clear path with nothing but bright skies in terms of our journey to integrating Cvent with your other platforms. And that really is my intent today. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Uh, Before we get too far, want to open up our very first poll of the day. And this is really going to help us understand where you are in your sort of integrations journey or Cvent journey, if you will. So if you would click on that poll button on the right hand side and let us know. Are you a new Cvent user? Right, I'd say maybe a year or less. I may consider new. Have you been using Cvent for quite some time? So a long time user, maybe a little bit more of a Cvent professional, or are you just here today because you're curious about Cvent in general and saw that Cvent integrates with these other solutions and sort of are trying to gather data about both Cvent and integration. I'll give it a couple minutes here and see, or a couple seconds, should I say, see what you all are responding with. But again, please click on that polls tab on the right hand side and vote in one of those responses to let us know a little bit more about you. All right. Cool. Well, I've got some results up here, and it's almost a pretty even split in thirds, maybe a little bit more skewing to brand new users as well as folks who may not be Cvent users at all. So I'm going to really try to make sure I don't get too specific of Cvent terminology here. If I do lose you at any point, again, ask questions, type something in the chat. I'm in there. My colleagues are in there, and I can absolutely sort of reshape or restate things throughout the presentation to make sure you're understanding what we're going through. So real quick, high level agenda of what we're doing today, right? So first, building the case why. Why are you even integrating with Cvent? I think, if I could hop into the DeLorean and go back 10 years to when I started at Cvent, it was a much more difficult conversation as to why Cvent needs to be even integrated with anything else, right? It was an event management solution. It did what it did, and it could live just there. But we've seen in that time the real need to integrate, and we'll talk about that. And I think a great way to talk about that is to actually look at customer use cases. Now, I've had to anonymize some of the information and made it a little bit more generic, but I do want to talk about uh, some use cases and some stakeholders that we see every day here at Cvent working with customers to help them reach success. We'll also talk about the types of integrations, right? So there's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different options based on complexity, who you have that might be able to work with an integration. And lastly, next steps, right? My whole goal here is as soon as you leave this webinar, there may be actual tangible ways for you to test an integration with Cvent. And, I really want to make sure that you're testing, right? The whole try before you buy experience. You know, before that was always an expectation. I think those expectations have even grown over time. So I want to give you some next steps. There's some integration stats that I wanted to share with you all today. And we looked at some of the more popular solutions that we integrate with, but certainly this could be applicable to any integration really in terms of the importance. But as it relates to these three specific tools, you can see that these uh, corporate organizations within the Fortune 500, 90% of them are using Salesforce in some sort of way, right? The world's largest SaaS platform. So it's no surprise that 90% of them are using them. Um, Globally, there are near 30,000 companies that are using Marketo as their marketing automation platform, right? So to be able to um, send out emails, track web pages, form fills, those type of things. Those marketing automation platforms then allow you to really shape how you'll market to someone based on the intelligence you have about them. And as you can also see, HubSpot, another platform that we integrate with that is really growing. Now, really, the power of these numbers here, just to show you which platforms are highly adopted out there, but really understand from a CVent perspective, only roughly 7% of our customers are really integrating with Salesforce. Now, in number, that's actually pretty big, right? We have thousands and thousands of customers, but 7%, considering how many customers use Salesforce, that's not a lot. So we want to see that integration increase because you're going to see from today's discussion what the real utility is with integrating. Same thing with Marketo, right? Only 3% of the Cvent customer base is integrating with Marketo. And it's really, in some cases, low hanging fruit to be able to do these and really see the impact of those integrations. So when we're talking about why it's important to integrate, I think it's also important to take into account who you may be within your organization, or who the stakeholders that will be sitting at the table when you discuss integrating Cvent with other platforms. I stole this image from my colleague Brad Gillespie many years ago, so I'd be remiss to not give Brad a shout out for a gift that keeps on giving, because I think this visual really helps, tell the story of not just the journey of uh, turning prospects into customers, but also turning customers into evangelists, right? Your work's not done from a marketing perspective. So if you're talking about marketing and sales perspective and their goals, the idea is, whether you're a corporate entity where you're trying to sell products and services, whether you're a membership organization that's trying to acquire and nurture relationships with members, um, or nonprofit or fundraising where your goal is to engage people to help, essentially fund a lot of your initiatives and nonprofit work that you're doing out in the community. Really is the story of acquiring new, and then once that person is a customer, and again we'll use that term loosely, how to really make them evangelists, right? How to have them ingrained with your organization, and maybe even help in acquiring those new prospects or customers. And in this image, you can see along the parabola, there are all of these marketing tactics that you use to help build awareness all the way to get somebody to purchase. And of course, from being purchasing to expanding their use of your platform and becoming evangelists. A lot of these marketing tactics are non-event related, right? You've got old school advertising, your websites, form fills, those type of things, your customer reviews, product demonstrations. But the blue dots on the parabola or on that journey symbolize some of the Cvent data. And what we've seen with a lot of our customers is the event data is always sort of anecdotal, right? We know that events are important. We can tell that they are, what their level of success is, because physically people are either there or they're not, but it stays in that silo. It stays in Cvent. And we need to get that information mixed in. Can you imagine the power of knowing, you know, Jane Smith visited our website 3 times in the past day, and then she went on to fill out a form, and then also attended a webinar, and that grew into attending our annual conference, which then grows into, other things along that attendee journey. And unless you tie all of that event data back to that marketing strategy, you're never going to get a full profile, and you're never going to be able to really personalize your marketing efforts in a successful way. So from a marketing and sales perspective, what we're doing is we're taking the attendee journey and adding that to all the rest of your marketing journey, and making sure you have full and complete profiles to be able to more effectively market and sell to prospects and customers. So that's just one stakeholder that and use case for integrations. The next is going to be around sort of IT and security perspectives, right? They're the doorman as it relates to what systems do what and what they can and cannot do. And I think this sometimes, especially for the event producers that I have traditionally worked with over my decade here at Cvent, one of the more scarier personas or stakeholders to chat with, because you live in two different worlds, but it really isn't that scary, right? This particular stakeholder is going to be concerned with, are people accessing tools securely? Is the data that's captured in those tools stored securely? And are we transporting them to uh, the other platforms on your tech stack in a secure manner, right? Meaning you're not just pulling a report of people who attended your last annual conference that has personal identifiable information in it and just emailing it out to someone, right? While it likely is secure, there's also bad actors out there. And the better, the faster, and the more secure that we can transfer data from one platform to another, the happier we're going to make these IT stakeholders um, in your business and in your life, right? These are people that you want to build relationships with and make sure they understand what your vision is in terms of integration, and oftentimes challenging them in terms of why Cvent needs to be an integrated part of your tech stack. If you get into specific industries, these sort of security and IT stakeholders are also going to care about other things. For example, our customers that are in financial services or life sciences verticals, they really have a need, through legal mandates to be able to understand how much you're spending for particular individuals, right? If you think about in the life sciences community being able and sunshine laws, being able to know that for Dr. A, we spent a specific amount of money because at any point you can be asked to provide that level of information. You likely already have external systems that are handling that for non-event related activities, but what about events, right? Using Cvent as that platform to capturing that data and then sending that data out to all of the tools that will be able to pull those reports so that if there's any time that you get checked on those type of things, you can provide it quick and easy and instantly, right? That's the other thing with integration is that there's not a delay. There's not a, you know, John, can you go run these reports and then save them as a PDF and email them to me, right? You should be able to access any of this information real time from your systems of record. So really making sure you're asking those IT and security stakeholders to join and being able to speak to them about some of these compliance and security items. Well, going in the wrong direction here. Okay. Of course, I can't forget about my favorite persona out here, right? Our event producers. So without integrating, we already know that the event producers got one of the most difficult positions out there, right? You've seen our presentations. It's one of the most stressful roles that you can have out in the working world. And prior to integrating, this might be you, right? You've got uh, so many things living in piles that aren't easy to file or put where they need to go. And here's a photo of my colleague Greg here doing a bit of a balancing act, right? Which a lot of event production can be. But if we start adopting integrations, right, we're trying to make everybody's life easier. We're trying to make my colleague right here happier, right? So these are just examples from an event production standpoint. By integrating, you're getting people off of your back to get those reports. You know that reports and information is stored securely. You know that the data that's coming into Cvent is clean and up to whatever standard that your external database of record is. Maybe it's your CRM, right? If that information is integrated with Cvent, we only have good data, right? Good data in means good data out. At any point where we start putting bad data in, you start getting bad data out. So, we want to make your life easier. We want to make you happier. Um, and integrating absolutely is going to be one of those pieces where if you're not doing it now, we should start. And we should start, maybe small. And again, we'll talk about those next steps towards the end of today's presentation. That was a lot of talking by me. So let's take a pause here. Let's find out a little bit more about you. So, which of the following best describes, in poll number 2 of today, your role within your organization, right? We just talked about some of the different personas and the different use cases that might be there. Would love to hear from you all what role you play in your organization, because again, I think that'll help us continue today's conversation. So if you would, right-hand side of your page, click on the polls tab and answer this second poll when you have a moment. I'll take a pause there and I'll go ahead and hydrate. All right, we've got one event producer in the house. Who else we got out there? All right, let's go ahead and start closing up the poll. But if you still haven't replied, if you could click on that poll, let us know um, what role you might be serving in. Oh, all right. So overwhelmingly, it looks like most everybody here is on that event producer role, though it looks like we do have some event technologists out there, which again is starting to evolve into its own role. And then it looks like we got some other folks, and we'll check in the chat who you might be. But thank you again for responding to that. So I will try to really hone in on the event producer, event planner persona as we go through this. But I'll be sure for all of you event technologists, operations, other marketing folks that we're still addressing this for you too. All right. So use cases. I don't know about you all, but I think it's a little bit easier for me to sort of put things into columns or buckets, if you will. I think that's a popular term here at Cvent, right? Bucketing things, um, and understand what an integration might look like through maybe complexity or difficulty, if you will, right? So um, if you haven't started with integrations whatsoever, or you're not familiar with Cvent, and you're just trying to see what an integration might do, maybe the focus here through the journey that we're going through today might be looking at simple integrations. When I think of simple, I'm thinking of a one-way integration. A lot of our smaller customers in the mid-market space and the nonprofit space, they have a simple integration where they simply just need to get event and attendee data, what status an individual might be, out to another system. Maybe in an effort to help sending email communications, those type of things. But let's say you're a little bit beyond that. To those folks who identified themselves as longtime Cvent users, you might fall into one of the two former buckets here. So it might be a moderate integration. When I think of moderate, I think of something that's bidirectional, right? So you're putting data into Cvent, maybe something like adding event details, or what we see most often is being able to sort of curate the invitation list using an external system, right? I have these qualified contacts and leads from my CRM. I know that they're the right people to go to a particular event, and we simply need to get them to the invitation list and deliver them invitation emails, right? So we're putting that data into Cvent. And just like the simple use case, we're going to want to get some of that information out of Cvent to understand where they are in the attendee journey, and start dripping them and sending them relevant marketing content, right, to help drive the behavior that you're looking for. I think also in this moderate column, you're tend to be doing a lot more of process automation within the target system, and we'll talk about that as we get a little bit more hands-on in this moderate bucket. Lastly is complex. This is not to say that smaller or mid-sized companies don't have complex integration needs, but I will say that most of the customers that I have seen be in this complex bucket tend to be large to very large membership organizations and or corporate entities, so for-profit organizations, where you have things like you know stricter compliance with how data can be exchanged and shared. You have more rules around how people access tools, so we'll talk about single sign-on and a few of those other um, access control tools. You also have the need to pull very specific reports and reports about very specific information, right? So maybe it's not just attendee data, but it's also some of that budgetary information that I mentioned earlier, right? When I used life sciences organizations as an example. So you're using more of the Cvent platform, meaning you're going to need to extract more of that Cvent platform data out of it. So let's start with that simple use case. And again, I don't want to confuse simple with you know not effective, because that's not true, right? You might have a very simple need, and just the pure fact of stopping of exporting and importing reports, that's probably a big monumental change for a lot of our customers, right? Because it's the only thing similar to the event management world. We say that our biggest competitor is really manual processes, and that's really still true for integrating, right? You know how to run a report, you know how to export a report, you know how to import a report. um, but when you start talking about wanting to strike while the iron is hot, that sort of lag and process and need to do manual labor, if you will, can really put pauses on that whole concept of striking while the iron's hot. So with a simple integration, the idea is that there would be zero actual development, right? So if somebody who actually knows how to code and build integrations, it would require none of that, right? We would even go to say with some simple integrations, you probably don't even really need any integration expertise, right? It's simply a method to uh, use an integration to carry data from point A to point B. And that might be a great way to think about it, right? Something simple as just an A to B conversation. There's not a lot of transforming of the data. I just need if there's a field called name in Cvent for a person, it also needs to map up with the name in the other system, and that type of just configuration is really what it is as opposed to development. So you'd see the ability to share the attendee lists and the event data, be able to build reports in that other system. We know that not everybody loves um, building and sharing reports out of Cvent because you may have a BI tool that might be a little bit more sophisticated or might be able to mix data that doesn't live in Cvent with the Cvent data. So we absolutely understand you want to build those reports in that other system. And of course, to that last sort of security piece, right? We want to limit the amount that you're pulling a report that has personal information on it and simply just emailing out to other folks. So let's look at our integration with HubSpot as an example. So I'm going to leave the PowerPoint deck for a moment and probably relog into my tools because I've been out of here for a moment. but um, let's go to HubSpot. So I like to think of our HubSpot as a simple yet powerful integration. And that is because we've built it that way, right? That was the intent. We understand that HubSpot has free versions, it has you know add-ons and those type of things that can make it more sophisticated. But you could, after this webinar, you could sign up for a free HubSpot account, um, link it up with your Cvent account, and see data moving back and forth. Right? Again, going back to what's the next steps. Now, that's something that we can talk about. But when I talk about there needing to be no coding and no serious development, I really mean it with a simple integration. So if we were to look at HubSpot as an example, um, what you really need is a Cvent login, the ability to follow a guide, which is on our developer site now, or I'm sorry, in our community website now. And you need to have some HubSpot credentials. So as you see here, in order to connect the two systems, all you have to do is this would say connect instead of remove connection because I'm already connected. But you click a button, it pops up a HubSpot window, it asks for your HubSpot login, and then you save, and now you're connected. The only other configuration you really need to do is say whether you want this integration to be on for all new events, or if you should have to manually turn it on at the event level. Once that's done, talking about a simple integration, it means that we have a logical landing area for the Cvent event information. In a system like HubSpot, Cvent attendees would align with your Cvent contacts, right? We match them by email address, and that's how it works. So that's the logical area for things like, somebody updated their job title or their telephone number. You want to capture that information because it's not like people are calling you up and saying, hey, I changed my title. Can you update it in your CRM, right? That's likely not happening. So let's use touch points like the events people are signing up for as a way to update their data. So we can go into a contact record and see that. The other thing is, where do we land all of that event data? And in a system like HubSpot, they have a standard object that's available to all customers called surprise marketing events, aligns perfectly with what Cvent's trying to do. So we can actually create a marketing event, give you information about it. And then as you sort of click on and look at those events, sort of get a sense of how many people are interacting with that particular event. Are they attended? Have they only registered? Did they no show? um, and being able to see all that information there. That doesn't mean that this is the end of the integration, right? Once the information lands in your target system, once you know somebody like Brett here has registered for an event or attended a particular event, it doesn't stop, right? That gives your salesperson a touch point. Hey, I saw you attended our, marketing event today. We talked about XYZ, right? Relevant talking and touch points. Maybe it also means you'd like to build out lists, right? So if you're going to add people to campaigns, if you're going to drip them content based on a single event or a mixture of events, or even better, a mixture of event data and non-event data like website visits or email opens, those type of things, you can take all those cross sections of information, start building all of your lists, based on all of those filters, like what events they've attended, and again, emails they've opened, sites they visited, and make lists, and then use those lists in workflows. So again, I know this is very quick, and we'll do more of a deep dive into this in a future session. But the idea is, it took very little effort to connect Cvent to HubSpot. We're storing the Cvent data in existing HubSpot objects and fields, and able to update them as needed. And then you're able to do whatever you'd like with that event information as soon as it lands to that target um, system. So that's sort of that simple use case. Let's look at something maybe a little bit more moderate. Again, I'm using moderate as being something a little bit more bidirectional, meaning you're placing data into Cvent as well as extracting data out of it. I think here it can still possibly have very little development, but it will require stakeholders. So we're going to use Salesforce as the example here in this moderate example. Um, and while your Salesforce administrator should likely be involved in it, it's not necessarily a requirement that they do everything, right? And it's certainly not a requirement that they will need to build, custom Apex or anything like that, right? Or custom development. It's still going to be more of a configuration, but you're going to need a lot of input from these stakeholders that we talked about earlier, right? So your marketing stakeholders who have an idea of what data is important to capture, your IT stakeholders in terms of, is it secure to connect, and if so, what fields should or should not be overwritten, right? Those are the types of conversations. So it'll be more planning intensive, but should still require very little to zero development. Oftentimes here, there's going to be that concept of getting the right bodies to the right events, right? So curating the invitation list based on what your sales and marketing stakeholders know in other systems. And I think another big case that we see this sort of moderate uh, integration need is around opt-outs, right? We all need to be compliant. None of us wants to find ourselves in spam jail, which really ends up being just a ton of fines, but nobody wants to take on those fines, right? So another reason why bidirectional or this sort of moderate type of integration is popular with our customers. So let's look at this through Salesforce. We already looked at HubSpot as an example for our simple use case, something a little bit more moderate. Cvent has several ways to integrate with Salesforce. What we're walking through today is our Cvent Salesforce app. The Cvent Salesforce app is something that you download, similar to download an app to your phone, and it has a lot of bi-directional functionality. So let's start with getting data to Cvent. One, this can happen from an individual level, right? We need to meet your colleagues, coworkers, and stakeholders where they're at, right? I think that term gets used quite a bit. Where they're at when you're a salesperson, or if you're a marketer and you're working in Marketing Cloud, is going to be within the Salesforce platform. So if I'm a salesperson, maybe I'm about to place a call to good old Duke here, Chief Napping Officer at Acme Corporation. True to that, Duke, who is my dog, is sleeping on the couch behind me. Uh, we can see as a salesperson that, oh, Duke has actually visited the website for a couple of our webinars, a couple of our events. That's interest, right? That's also a talking point. What's going on at this particular innovation symposium that I, as a salesperson, could pick up the phone, call Duke, and build a case as to why he's there. Now, I probably don't want to be, hey, I see you visited the website. That might be a little too much like the, I see you left this in your shopping cart. But it does give us a logical springboard to have that conversation. Well, our innovation symposium, we're really talking about the next wave of AI and how it intersects with our industry, something like that, right? That seems to be a pretty hot topic right now. So get that conversation started and start it in a way where you already have information. Now, if Duke says he is interested in that event, I could actually click a button, and this would send an invitation email, a Cvent invitation email more specifically, to Duke, and he could click on that and register himself. We can track that this invitation was triggered from a user in Salesforce. So if you're trying to attribute how people are getting invited and registered for events, we'd be able to do that. We could even take this a step further, right? Customer service wise. I'm already on the phone with Duke. He's like, I'm absolutely interested in going to the symposium. It's local. Can you just go ahead and register me? We have, again, in that bi-directional workflow, the ability to find events and register them for that. Going to some of the compliance and sort of security and continuity, it can also pre-populate information that lives in Salesforce into the registration form, right? So we're taking information like their title, um, email, name, anything else. You can even hide fields, right? The qualifiers or other information that you want to store about that person in the Cvent database. We can push that over both in the invitation and these registration workflows. And as Duke registers, attends, those type of things, you'll see that we're updating that information in Salesforce. Let's assume they do go to the event from an individual level. We can also see what they did within that event. So in this case, all the different sessions that Duke went to in a particular event, right? A lot of times, especially in the corporate space, sessions equal products or services. If I know that Duke went to three different sessions about product A, odds are he's pretty likely going to be at least interested, if not want to buy in that sort of product set. So, what type of content can you drip to them? What type of follow up is sales going to give? And that's just at the individual level. This same thing can be done in bulk. We can also use campaigns as a way to trigger bulk invitations. We've even built a way to automate it. So as soon as somebody's added to a campaign, right, they can be invited to a Cvent event immediately. So that's sort of the getting the data into Cvent as well as some of the getting data out of it. There's also that concept of proving ROE, as Cvent likes to say, return on event, or of course just return on investment, ROI. Here, we're able to use campaigns to automatically do things like create opportunities. Those opportunities can be associated to both that campaign and the event. So, in a more A to B direct way, while I know sometimes it's not as direct, we can really see how events are influencing your business and help you build a case as to why perhaps you might need more budget, more events, to maybe retool some events based on the type of data that's being sent back to Salesforce that you can share with leadership and stakeholders. So that's that moderate use case. Let's talk about something a little bit more complex. Complex again, we usually see this in large enterprises or large sort of mid-market businesses. This absolutely will require a developer, right? When we start venturing into this space, your IT stakeholders will be a little bit more in the driver's seat, um, and with good reason, right? Their level of expertise is going to be needed when we're really configuring an ecosystem as opposed to an A to B solution or A to B back to A solution. Uh, you're going to have multiple systems connected. You're also going to be using more of the Cvent platform. So perhaps you're using our meeting request process, or you're using our budget or spend per participant modules. You're also going to be concerned with things like access management. So who can access what, and within that system, what can they even do? And then, of course, there's sort of that maintaining compliance and what that compliance means. Might differ from organization to organization. So no real world hands-on things like I did with Salesforce and HubSpot. Here, it's going to be more of um, a diagram, and maybe I could change the headline here. So this could just say complex. There we go. That'll make me feel better. Live TV, right? So a complex integration is going to involve multiple layers, multiple tools, and of course, multiple stakeholders. In this scenario here, we've got all of the Cvent tools living on the left-hand side, and then different platforms or different services that exist across your platform. So let's talk about the first one. Who are you and what are you allowed to do in Cvent? Many organizations of all different sizes, especially because identity providers and SSO tools have really gone down in complexity and cost. So a lot of organizations are using tools like single sign-on or SSO, right? This is where you use one universal login, and by doing so, it helps you access specific tools. What you don't see behind the scenes is that your IT folks are not only saying who can access what, but oftentimes are giving you roles or permissions within each of those tools so that you could only do what your position or responsibilities within the company are. So as part of that, with a complex organization, we usually see them implement their single sign-on provider to allow access to Cvent, so you don't have to remember yet another password, as well as make sure that you're only able to do that specific set of features that you need to do within Cvent or any other platform. In a complex world, we also see the use of, it's called a lot of things, data warehouse, those type of things. But the idea is you can use our public APIs to then take any relevant Cvent information and park it into a data warehouse, meaning, that warehouse is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a storage facility for all of your data and allows your developers to take the data that's stored there, and when they're ready for it, builds means to send that data to the specific tools they need to go to, map to the specific fields that they want. Maybe also want us plugged in directly to your CRM in a two-way method, similar to what we just talked about Salesforce. You want to be able to put good data into Cvent with the right fields and the right opt-out statuses, etc. And then once somebody interacts with the event, sending that back to the CRM so your sales and marketing folks can work with it immediately. And of course, marketing automation, automatically getting them to campaigns and things based on what they've done at the event. We talked about that a bit with HubSpot. Digital content management. Again, these are all multiple systems that live within a large organization that you'll want to have a discussion on integrating with. Again, with those complex use cases, we're going to have a lot of stakeholders. This is going to require multiple calls and a lot of planning, and likely is going to take more time to get set up, but once set up is going to be very worthwhile. All right, so we went through those three different sort of use cases and looked at some examples within them. Um, Types of integrations. This is a little bit easier of a concept to understand. There are really sort of two types when we talk about integrating with Cvent. First is a connector. In that simple and that moderate use case, we were looking at connectors, right? An app that connects to Salesforce or a connector that goes to HubSpot. These require no actual coding or development. It really is focused more on configuring. So being able to follow a guide, map fields, certainly you need to have understanding of where data will land and what should be overwritten and what shouldn't be, those type of things, but certainly isn't going to require hands-on keyboards type of development. And your IT stakeholders are going to be more of advisors when you're using a connector as opposed to the builder. Those aren't, hard and fast rules. Those, it's just what we typically see, right? The uh, setup and configuration and management of these connectors tend to fall more on your day-to-day Cvent administrators versus an IT stakeholder really having to own it. Of course, in larger organizations where you have IT representatives that can live over specific verticals within your business, you may have an IT person that manages it. One thing with connectors, though, is that they do have a very specific set of features. So, if you think about every connector as a box of functionality, you are limited as to what functionality lives within that box. Again, this is great for being able to move quickly and being able to set things up quickly and without a lot of planning and or input from other stakeholders. But it also means you may be dreaming up of integrating something in a way that doesn't fit inside of that box. And when we start leaning towards that direction, that's when we start looking at more customized integration. Similar to that complex use case, this is absolutely something that's going to be, developed. There's going to be some, developers involved in actually building it. It also extends out the deployment time, so it's going to take a lot longer to plan as well as implement this type of integration. And The good part, though, of a customized integration is that the features are really only limited by the ability of your developers as well as the APIs of both of the systems, Cvent and wherever else you want that to go. So sort of think about here based on your integration journey or your Cvent journey, what might be the most logical next step for you. Before we get to some of those next step options, um, I'm interested. We want to know, right? We have integrations with HubSpot, with Salesforce, with Marketo, with Eloqua, who tend to be the largest marketing automation players. But in the poll right now, if you all wouldn't mind, let us know which marketing automation platform that you're most interested in learning how to integrate Cvent with. I'll take a pause there, give you a moment to click on that poll button on the right-hand side and give us a response. All right. In the interest of time, maybe we'll come back to this one. So we'll close this poll out and show the results later. Looks though from the initial responses, we've got a lot of Salesforce and Sales and Marketing Cloud folks, HubSpot users out there. No surprise. I'm glad to see it. That's a great platform. So how do we get started? First and foremost, try before you buy. In any of these scenarios, I know I mentioned it in only two on the screen that you can see here. It's really try a Zap. What is a Zap? Let me take a step out of here and show you. So Cvent has a partnership with Zapier. Zapier is an integration platform as a service. So it actually allows you to build integrations between Cvent and 4,000 other solutions. So if you are curious and want to see an integration work before you start committing to things, or you simply are just like to play around with things, if you have a Cvent account, you absolutely have access to Zapier, right? There's no additional cost to use the Zapier integration as long as you have a Cvent professional or enterprise license. And in this example, right, I can build an integration where, every time, um, an attendee registers or something like that, I want it to update a card or a board or whatever it may be, right? These are simple and oftentimes free ways to test out integrations. And I highly, highly suggest that any of you that are curious to go ahead and um, try that. Other things that you might be able to do to get started. If any of the connectors we talked about today are of interest, or something like the Salesforce app, we do trials of the Salesforce app. So maybe in that moderate column, again, you can get your hands on it to see if it actually fits the use cases you're looking for. You will want to build a case on why to integrate. We talked about some of those points here, but certainly your Cvent account manager and your client success representative can help build those cases. And of course, you're going to want to schedule a call with your internal stakeholders. And in a complex organization, it might not be as much about try before you buy as it is about the planning. And we have a lot of experience through our account management. We have a consulting group within Cvent that can help consult on these integration projects. So please reach out to your account managers, let them know that you're interested, that you have a bit of a complex integration need, and let's get those conversations started now, because it's a long road in a complex scenario to get integrated. And if we start now, we can hopefully see a finish line. All right, so we're going to shift over to Q&A. We've been asking questions all along here, and I want to make sure I um, answer those. So let's look at them. Um, what's an example of an integration that syncs the attendee lists you're mentioning? Um, do you mean, well, I'll answer it in two ways. An example of an integration that syncs attendee lists. If you're talking about adding lists to Cvent, you can use our Salesforce app. You can use Zapier, as I mentioned. That's sort of an easy try before you buy to be able to add people to the invitation list. If you're talking about getting the attendee list out of Cvent in a simple way, again, any of our connectors do it. So if you work with Salesforce, if you work with Marketo, if you work with Eloqua, if you work with HubSpot, all of these integrations allow basically the attendee list to be added to an external system. And again, Zapier is also something where if it's not something we have a connector with, there's over 4,000 solutions you can use there. All right, next question. I think this one is a little bit more Salesforce related. Salesforce is a robust platform that is updated frequently. How does Cvent stay apprised of those updates so that the integration continues to function properly? From Erica. Erica, thank you for that. That's a great question. So we are partners with Salesforce, and I think even if we weren't the level of partnership that we are, I'm pretty sure anyone that has an app on their app exchange, we get regular communications about their updates. So, for example, we got a communication recently about the Winter 24 package that will be coming out late this year and will be enforced to all of you Salesforce customers in the beginning of the year. You know, probably March, April, they'll sort of force that package onto everyone. They give us enough heads up about what's involved in it and if they foresee that there are any issues with it. Um, I will also say that a lot of the making sure that their updates don't affect our integrations oftentimes are through just our developers, right? We do routine testing when we release updates to each integration to make sure that they still work properly. So I'd say most of it comes from the other systems letting us know that these updates are coming, but there's certain amount that just happens naturally in our sort of QA, QE process. Um, let's see. Are you finding a lot more organizations actively looking to integrate the platforms more? Would you say it's a new trend? Rob, that's a great question. Um, I can answer this through my decade working at Cvent, and I also worked in the events industry prior to coming to Cvent. I can say the level of customers that are looking to integrate now are the same people 8 years ago, where if you mentioned integration to them, they would have said, I'm not ready for that. I don't need that. Right. Um, Talking about meeting people at where they're at 8 years ago, they weren't there. But now everything you use is integrated, right? I have a little circle on my coffee table that can turn on my alarm and turn on the TV and turn lights on and off. You know, integration is just more part of our life now. And I think as it becomes more of a part of your day-to-day life, it certainly is becoming more part of your business and work life. So I think we're just at a place where one, the technology has become a little bit easier to put your hands on when you're not a technical person or you're not a developer. Um, Two, I think a lot of the products out there, like Cvent, have instead of making it a go build an integration yourself, we give you the tools to be able to build, but we're expecting you to build. Through time and evolution, we see that customers want something that's a little bit more easy to configure, easier to manage. So, you know, a lot of platforms like Cvent have built these easier integrations. And the last is, you know, I just think that integration in general is its own industry. You know, you have these multi-million, multi-billion dollar iPaaS organizations, companies, right? That their entire business is how do I make it easy for people to transport data from A to B without knowing how to be a developer? And all these things have just progressed, you know, over the past decade. Great question, Rob. Thank you for that. Let's see. Does Cvent integrate with Workday to assist with contact info staying up to date? From Julia. Julia, yes, we can integrate with Workday. Of the options that we looked at today, a connector versus something custom, Workday is actually something that's a little bit more middle ground. We have a team internally. Big shout out to our sales engineering team. They're the ones that can help build integrations to certain solutions. And if I'm not mistaken, this is one that they can essentially help. You know, it's not fully developed, if you want to think about it that way, where, you know, it's coding. It's somewhere in the middle where we can help set it up for you and then hand it off to you for management. So Workday is absolutely a possibility. Again, reach out to your account manager, your client success representative, and we can start investigating what's the best method for you. Last question that I see up here. Any suggestions, examples to integrate with BI tools like Google Looker, Tableau, etc.? Um, Alexander, I don't have specific suggestions, and I certainly don't want to turn this into a, you know, a commercial for partners and other companies that we work with. I can let you know that we have built and seen integrations with platforms like Tableau, like Domo, I believe is also a data thing. Um, there's one with a snow logo. Is it a snow? Is it Snowflake? Something like that. So we have seen integrations with those particular tools. I would say though, take that question a step further and maybe more than you're asking for, is really taking the time in the planning of figuring out what data is important to you and where does it need to go. Um, so an example might be, in your world, maybe it's really only attendee data. You don't care about financial or budgetary information. So what of that attendee data is important to you? And do you want us to send it directly to that BI tool? Or would you rather us drop it somewhere like a data warehouse or data storage and then have your developers pull that information from there and then get it to the BI tool? So great question. The good news is most of these BI tools have public APIs. We have public APIs. So as long as the APIs exist, we could really build an integration between any solution.